Okay, now welcome back. Joining me here now in the studio is Congressman Louie Gohmert of Tyler, here to talk about all things political. And I'm telling you, we've cut a big area of the show for you today to talk about, because there's lots of things I want to ask you. Lots of things I want to ask you. Lots of things, like last week, I was on vacation down in Trinity County, shoveling dirt, but listening to talk radio, and everything broke loose in the House of Representatives. So first of all, tell us exactly what happened. You were there. Kevin McCarthy, John Boehner Light, as some people would say, was set to go. He walks into the big room, giving everybody one of these or whatever. It comes out hours later, there's his wife and kids or whatever, and he says no. So tell us what happened. I want to know.
It was a surprise. Of course, I've been supporting Dan Webster. He's the only person I know of in America that has been a Speaker of the House, a first Republican Speaker of the House in Florida, who actually decentralized the power and got it out among the members. If we could do that in Washington, we would transform the country, because we'd be more representative. We wouldn't have a dictator like Boehner was. But yes, Boehner had chosen Kevin. He had anointed him with oil. He's going to be the new Speaker. But Kevin had some missteps and something he'd said to Sean, and it's still creating problems because it wasn't accurate. But anyway, Kevin gets up there and he's saying, you know, what an honor it is to be here, and then he starts fading, and somebody yells, "Speak up, we can't hear you." And then he says, "Well, I just wanted to thank you for, you know, your support and whatnot." And then he says, "But I'm not the one to unite us, so I'm withdrawing."
Whoa.
And everybody was going, "What did he say?" I think he said he just withdrew. So Boehner steps up and said, "In view of this, votes postponed, move to adjourn, we're adjourned." And that was it.
That's incredible.
Well, it was. And the next morning at 9, we had another conference. And I got up and I was saying, Mr. Speaker, Kevin did a very noble thing here. That's the time when you can have some real healing, and it could have been very therapeutic for our party to come together. Kevin does something noble, and then we ought to talk about it. And we should have had a discussion, because I know good and well, if Webster or Chaffetz is withdrawn, you would have gone right ahead with the election. And yet you just postponed without getting any input. And that's been our problem. You don't get input. You just make an announcement and here we go. And so I'm telling you, Neal, we have got to have a leader who understands there's a lot of intelligence, a lot of talent, business talent, all kinds of talent in that body, and people are not being allowed to properly represent them.
Just in case people don't know, so we're talking about the centralization of power. And before, the way it's supposed to be, you're supposed to go there, Mr. Speaker, I have something to add, perhaps a bill or whatever, but you're being shouted down saying, I don't think it's going to pass. Shut up, sit down, I'm running things. And that's what has
that bill's not going to the floor. Well, I know a big majority of the Congress wants that bill through. I'm not bringing it to the floor. Okay, I'm bringing my bill to the floor, but you can't make any amendments. And then that's called a closed rule if you don't allow anybody to make any amendments. And Pelosi set the record for the most closed rules. She allowed the fewest amendments on bills of any speaker, and then Boehner broke her record. We were supposed to be the people that were not afraid of debate. We'll talk about anything. We'll win the debate, and we'll win because we're representing the hearts of people.
Now let's talk about this. You're being demonized, at least 50 of you are, because how dare you go to Washington, D.C. and actually represent people in your district who sent you there. This is why, this is a conservative district. And so whether you're liberal or whatever, you got to admit, this is a red state, red county, red district for you. So people want conservative values up there, but you're being blamed on talk radio, by the national press, by other politicians or whatever, Mr. King from New York and the whole thing. You guys are getting in the way. Shut up, sit down, get along or whatever. So what does it feel like to be an absolute, you're being demonized?
We have been. But the truth is, we saw in the vote that funded Homeland Security and did not defund the massive illegal unconstitutional amnesty that the president did. We had 167 vote against the funding without defunding the amnesty. Only 75 voted for it. My point is, Neal, that the big majority of our conference represents very conservative areas. And as you know, in East Texas, man, you know, if you didn't vote in the Democratic primary, you usually didn't vote in a contested race.
Yeah.
And so people care a lot less about parties in East Texas than they do just foundational principles of America. And I think that's what I'm supposed to be representing for our district.
I'm not the smartest guy in the world at all, but I did have a little bit of
smarter than most of Washington. But yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I did have civics for government in the 5th grade.
Yeah.
And in the 5th grade, we studied the Senate, we studied the House of Representatives, and last week all I heard was, this is chaos, this is horrible, who's in charge, what the heck, who's on first or whatever. This is the way the House of Representatives is supposed to work. The Senate's different, but all the volatility of whatever politics, it's supposed to happen in the House, and it amazes me that people who report politics for a living don't know that.
Yeah, they don't get it. And one of the things that I've been told by people that were around in 95, 96, when the new Republican majority got so many good things done, forcing Congress to live under the same laws everybody else did welfare reform, and yes, Clinton vetoed it 1 or 2 or 3 times, and then they got it through, overrode. When they had enough to override it, you had to sign it finally. And then same with the balanced budget. They got all these good things done, and people told me that back then, when we went into a Republican conference, the Speaker, Newt Gingrich, did not stand up and say, here's the bill we're going to take to the floor today, and I need everybody to vote for it. They came in and they knew they were going to be talking about what was coming to the floor that week, and they knew it was going to be a very unpleasant conference, and there was going to be a lot of yelling. By the time everybody left the room, no matter how long it took, they were going to have agreed on a bill that they could all go vote for. We hadn't had that since I've been there. And it's not a pretty process. It is like watching sausage be made. But it's like I used to say at Green Acres Baptist Deacons meeting, you know, some people would say, we need to all be completely in agreement. And I would say, look, unless somebody has 100% lock on God's truth all the time, it's good to have disagreement, and let's hear from each other and then come to our conclusion.
This is what amazes me once again, because we heard chaos, who's in charge, who's on first, or whatever. Last week, I heard a radio talk show host, I think you've been with him before, Mark Levin, read Ronald Reagan's speech back in the late 70s. I was in high school, to CPAC. We were going through the same thing back then, because back then they're like, you know, no, you guys, Republicans, need to shut up, sit down, get with the program, go along. And then this guy from California, who was the governor, who used to be an actor, who was a dunce, who stood up and basically said exactly what you're saying, that, hey, we've seen this before, it's time, and it's time to rally. And for conservatives, to me, it kind of reminds me of the same things going on right now.
It sort of is.
This is not unusual.
Yeah, and in fact, some people have forgotten, like George Will, brilliant conservative, but George said that Ted Cruz is basically a kamikaze. He forgot that back in the late 70s, he wrote an article and said, Ronald Reagan is a kamikaze. He forgot.
It was the same thing back then. He was called a bomb thrower and didn't know what he's doing or whatever.
And yet he got our country back on track. Now, people remember tax reform and tax cuts under Reagan, but one of the most important things he did, he promised beforehand, I will eliminate 2/3 of the federal regulations. He actually did that, and the country flourished, and it led to a good time in the 90s. And we struggled some after the 86 tax reform because it hurt us in some of the things that were done there, but it really helped get the country back on track after the melees of the Carter years.
So let me ask you this. Now, I'm playing D.C. journalist, so Mr. Gohmert, will you shut down the government?
No.
Only the president can shut down the government.
Well, actually, Harry Reid shut it down 2 years ago. We passed 4 bills. 3 of them were huge compromises, giving Reid everything he wanted. We tried to postpone Obamacare for a year, postpone the individual mandate, but gave him everything else he wanted. And then we said, okay, here's some moderate conferees. You send your conferees, we'll have a deal within hours. He shut it down. Now, we have no intention of shutting it down, but this continuing resolution we passed is only good through December 11th.
Okay.
So Boehner can say, bye-bye, I did everything you wanted, and he'll be gone when it all comes to a head.
Well, thank you for being here. Our producer said there's no way you can go 10 minutes. I said we could do 45 minutes to an hour, and we've done that, so please come back.